Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathleen Gibson, and I'm the Early Childhood Specialist here at PTSI. I'd like to thank you all for joining the second session of Therapist Thursdays. Today, we'll be talking about the everyday hands-on activities we can do to support our child's early development. PTSI is excited to bring you this series on simple and fun ideas to build skills and activities at home during this time. We have set aside time near the end of the presentation to go over any questions you may have. You can submit your questions through the chat box located in the controls near the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions that are personal in nature, we will follow up over email. We will also share a copy of this presentation and any additional resources with everyone afterwards. I'd like to welcome Ginny Hopkins. Ginny is an expert in the field of early childhood development. With 13 years teaching preschool and both undergraduate and graduate degrees in early childhood education and administration, she now serves as a department chair and associate professor of early childhood development at Tidewater Community College in Portsmouth, Virginia. She was an instrumental lead in achieving NAEYC accreditation for her early childhood program, becoming the second nationally accredited program in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Jeannie has served on the State Board of Directors for the National Association of the Education of Young Children, NAEYC, been involved with public policy in Washington, D.C., and served as a rater for the Virginia Quality Initiative. Additionally, she spent several years working for the Navy as a respite care provider for exceptional children with special needs. She also enjoys teaching private and community workshops for parents and early childhood educators. Welcome, Jeannie.
Thank you. Well, I am so excited to be here with you guys. This is going to be interesting. I just want to tell you guys everything I have to share with you for your children because I've had so many years and so many amazing opportunities to learn things to do with children that are developmentally appropriate. So it's going to be interesting to do this in 20 minutes. It's going to be kind of like a race. So let's go ahead and get started. So basically what I want to do is take this time to give you things to actually do with your kids. So there's going to be very few words and more things for you to actually do with your children. So after this webinar, you guys are going to receive a email with handouts that will give you information, one on how to connect with learning standards for your children, whether they're birth to age 5 or K through 12. You're going to receive some information on how to read those and what developmentally appropriate practice looks like. You're also going to receive some more information and the links to do the activities that I'm going to show you really quick on here. And then lastly, you're going to receive a link of probably about 100 different activities to do, ranging in all the domains or subjects of early childhood. So you can really just take these couple I give you and then run with them if you want. So first wanted to talk about learning and how it occurs. So a young child's brain forms really fast. As a matter of fact, between the ages of 0 at birth and 5, 90% of the child's brain is being developed. So these young years are absolutely paramount in providing them with both informal, which means your everyday activities, everyday conversation you have, and formal, which is planned activities. According to theorist Jean Piaget, learning should be meaningful. That means things that actually mean something to a child, like just setting the table or talking about things that you pass in the car. They should be hands-on, which means they should be concrete. Children should be able to touch and smell and taste and hear what they're working with. That's why worksheets and flashcards are not necessarily developmentally appropriate for children under the age of 8. They have not been able to think in an abstract way. They need concrete objects. According to Lev Vygotsky, which is another child development theorist, they should be scaffolded. Scaffolded is exactly what it sounds like when you think of a scaffolding on the side of a building, you know, where people might climb up to clean windows or something. It gets built piece by piece. So scaffolding means you take a child from where they're at, leveling up to where you want them to be. What are you trying to teach them? This includes questioning for analysis and reasoning. So it's not necessarily just asking kids what the right answer is, like what color is this, or what number is this, or can you count? It's asking them questions to get them to critically think and really analyze and reason things, such as why do you think that happened, or why did you predict that will happen, or how do you think that can happen, or how did you know that? Questions that really get children to think about what they're thinking about. It's called metacognition in psychology. Learning should also be comprehensive. So in child development, we call them domains. In K-12, they're called subjects. So we're going to look at 6 different areas today, and I'm going to give you both informal and a formal activity to do. So these activities are going to fall under language and literacy. Language is the oral, the talking and listening, whereas literacy is the reading and writing. We're going to look at cognitive, which has to do with the brain and how it organizes things. This includes math, science, and social studies subjects. We're going to look at creative, which involves visual arts, dance, music, and dramatic play. In K-12, it's called theater. We're going to look at physical health and well-being. So physical includes gross motor, your whole body movement, and fine motor, which is your hands, your wrists, dexterity, and so forth. And then health and well-being, which includes health, safety, and nutrition. Lastly, we're going to look at social, which is relationships with self, understanding self, and relationships with others, and emotional, which is identifying and regulating emotions. So let's get started. All right. Like I said, I'm going to give you guys a handout. You're going to receive it via email, but you can look at these documents that are put out. They're research-based observable behaviors of what children are typically learning and skills they're capable of doing at each age. The Virginia Milestones of Child Development outlines children birth to 5 years old, and then the Virginia Standards of Learning, or SOLs, are free and available for you to look up online for kindergarten and up. So I'm going to include links for those and a little bit of explanation for those. All right, language and literacy. So one formal thing you can do is practice with young children environmental print. Instead of showing them flashcards that are just pictures, show them things that are meaningful like environmental print. Children can look at pictures like these and identify the symbols and associate in their mind. They're going to form neural pathways in their brain that is going to get them to say, okay, I recognize this picture. I'm putting words with the picture, and that's going to help them start to build the foundation for beginning to read. This is really easy to find. You can just simply Google environmental print for preschoolers, environmental print for kindergartners, and you can find tons of free printables like this. You can cut these out, you can play games, use these as flashcards, ask children what these say, encourage them, prompt them. How did you know that was Burger King? And, do you know what letter this starts with? Why did you choose this one? All right, so that's just one formal activity. When it comes to informal, talking to your children is so important. There are so many research studies out there that go over the importance of language and how many words a child hears versus how you can predict successes of that child in their academic years. So the more you talk to a child, the more they're going to be successful academically in life. So do things like map your actions. For instance, if you're changing your baby's diaper, talk through it. I see that your diaper's wet. Let's change it. Let's get you out of this. I bet this feels better. Okay, now I'm going to grab a wipe. We're going to wipe you clean and we're going to put on a fresh new diaper. That feels dry, doesn't it? It may sound silly talking about what you're doing with an infant or a toddler, but it's so important because, again, the brain is developing the most. 90% of that physical brain in their head is developing before age 5. So it's imperative that you talk as much as you can to these children, ask lots of questions, and then listen. Give them a time to talk. Another one that's really informal, really easy, read. Read all the time. And when you don't feel like reading, search for books being read on YouTube. There's tons of age-appropriate books that you can find on YouTube being read to children, which I'm going to include one a little later in this presentation. But you can virtually search any children's book and you can find it either animated on YouTube or being read on YouTube. So when you get tired of reading, go to YouTube to read. And lastly, sing. Singing increases the language that children hear and produce, which increases the child's language bank in which they can speak. So sing songs, make up songs. The students in my college class laugh at me all the time because I sing what I'm going to do and what I'm thinking all the time. Remember, they're your kids. They don't care how silly you act. They're going to remember that when they grow old. They're going to remember how you used to sing as you did laundry about the wrinkled clothes that lay all over your bed. Sing a song about that. So just informal things are really important with language and literacy. Cognitive. All right, I know some of you guys are concerned about messes, and this is one thing that is really not that messy, although it looks like it. It's called oobleck. And for you older ones, there's you not older ones, but ones with older kids, there's a book called Bartholomew and the Oobleck, which you can YouTube. There's a video on it. It's not age appropriate for younger kids because it's too long. But basically, this is a suspension. And what it is you just mix cornstarch with a little bit of water, and you mix it until it forms kind of like a gooey paste. And in chemistry, it's termed a suspension because when you move it, like say you're making a ball, it is a solid. But say you let go and just let it sit in your hand, it kind of melts and turns into a liquid. So it's both a liquid and a solid. Because it's just cornstarch and water, it cleans up with just water and a paper towel. Super easy. You can get it everywhere. When it dries, it vacuums right out of your carpet. I've swept it, mopped it, vacuumed it. It is, I promise, super easy. And it's one of the most fun things to play with. This is one of the favorite things of my students that we do in our teaching math, science, and social studies class. So you're learning math as you measure, you're learning science as you predict, and have the chemistry aspects of it. There's just lots of great stuff about this. Informally, you have to make food. And I'm not judging, even if you're just making a frozen pizza or hamburger helper or soup from a can, you can have children be a part of that. Ask your older children that are learning how to read, ask them to read the instructions. Ask any child that can recognize numbers, so age 4 and up, to measure ingredients. Teach them what half and fourth looks like. Let them mix ingredients. That's great, fine motor skills. Ask them to set a timer, or ask Alexa to set a timer. There's math right there. Ask those open-ended questions like, why do you think we need to include that, for instance? Say you're making a cake with the child and you put sugar in, and you ask the child, why do you think we need to put sugar in it? What would happen if we didn't? So just everyday things that you can do teaches math, science, and social studies. Creative. I recognize that not everybody has paint in their home. And so I'm including with you, with this email, a homemade paint recipe that is just everyday items that most people have in their kitchen. Flour, water, food coloring. That's it. You've got to put it in a pot. It's not going to ruin your pot, but it's really easy to make. So I encourage you, if you don't have paintbrushes, that's great, especially your children that are infants and toddlers. They're in what's called a sensory motor stage. You can look that up. That's by the theorist Jean Piaget, who proposes that children birthed at age 2 learn by their senses and by movement. Motor, sensory, motor. So that explains why children put everything in their mouth and they want to get into everything, because that's how they learn. Whereas our children 2 to 7 years old, they need those concrete objects. They're in what's called the pre-operational stage, meaning pre-operational. The brain is almost operational towards an adult, to where at 7 and up, they're in that stage where they can abstract think. That's why SOL testing does not start till grade 3, because they cannot comprehend that kind of learning. So back to my point with paint. Let them paint with their fingers. Let them paint on foil, saran wrap, wax paper, computer paper, whatever you have. Let them paint on old t-shirts. As a matter of fact, you might want to put an old t-shirt over their clothes so you can just take it off and throw it in the washer. Just remember that the messes are not a big deal. They can be cleaned up. I'm not saying that you should do paint on white carpet. Don't do that. But, do it on the kitchen floor where you have tile floor and it's easy to clean up. Find found items around the house like blocks and Legos. Those bath loofahs you have, you probably have 27 of them. You don't need them all. Use one to paint. Use kitchen utensils like forks, potato mashers, that sauce rub brush that you put the barbecue sauce on, use that. Find an extra comb, or, my dentist gives me a toothbrush every 6 months when I go. I don't change. I have an automatic toothbrush, so I use those toothbrushes to paint with. Informally, listen to music. Not all the time, but listen to a variety of music. One of my favorites is the 60s, 70s, and 80s Pandora station. Listen to swing dance like Glenn Miller Band. Listen to Motown like Aretha Franklin. My preschoolers used to love Ain't No Mountain High Enough and ABC 123, by the Jackson 5. Listen to cultural music, music from Africa, music from Mexico. Listen to techno music with no words at all. And then dance to the music. Dance like nobody's looking. Move your body and be a role model, because children do what they see. When you dance, your child's going to dance. Your actions speak louder than words. All right, physical health and well-being. All right, Maybe you have solo cups. Maybe you just have a bunch of random plastic cups that don't match and they're just like the kids' cups in your cupboard. Take them out, stack them. If you have a ball, great, use it. If you don't, take old newspaper or magazines, ball it up and wrap a bunch of masking tape or painting tape or duct tape or whatever you have around it, and let your kids bowl in the kitchen. This is going to keep them active and busy for quite some time. Informally, go for a walk. Make a step challenge goal. Maybe you have a Fitbit or Apple, or maybe your phone tracks steps. Say, how many steps do you think we should try for? Do you think we should try for 5,000 today or 2,000? And see if you can get to it and make a game out of it. Have a dance party. Listen to all kinds of crazy music. Ask your kids what they want to listen to and dance around the living room as a family. Include your child in meal preparation, just like we talked about. This is nutrition. Have everyday conversations about safety, like hot items. Have open conversations about burn prevention and what things are hot in your household. Talk about a fire escape plan, what happens when a fire might happen, and the importance of calling 911, how to do it, why to do it, when to do it. Just have these conversations with your children. It's really important. A lot of people think it's not appropriate to talk to young children as you would adults, but it totally is. And it builds not only their cognitive skills, their thinking skills, but it also builds their language skills. All right, moving on to social. One formal activity to do is read or watch the book Rainbow Fish, which is about the importance of making friends and sharing. In the handout, I've given you a link to the actual video of it being read. I've also given you in the handout a link that will bring you activities that go with the book. These are reading tips for if you want to read and talk about things during the book. These include art activities, block play, and then another literacy activity. So you can take one book and do lots of activities through it. But the social part here is learning about making friends and sharing. And I don't know about you guys, but I know a lot of people right now have siblings at home and it's like World War III. So this might be a good time to talk about sharing. Informally, have your child do an all about me art piece. Have them use magazine clippings, photos that you've taken and printed maybe. Give them whatever art materials you have, even if it's just a pen or a pencil. You don't have to have crayons and markers and all that elaborate stuff. You can just use a pencil or a pen. And then prompt them. Use that scaffolding I told you about. What do you love? Draw a picture of that. What's important to you? What are 3 things you couldn't live without? What are your favorite things? What are some character traits you have, like honesty, integrity, humor? Are you funny? Have a child really get to know themselves and form a firm foundation on who they are, because that's important when it comes to adulthood. And lastly, we have emotional. Emotional has to do with identifying and regulating feelings. I've given you guys the link in the handout to this printable. It's free. They have it both in English and Spanish. And as you can tell, it's got varied skin tones, so it's very, very diverse, which I love about this. But look at each picture and talk about what it means to be frustrated. What does your face and body do when you're frustrated? Can you think of the time when you were frustrated? Or what do you think would make you frustrated? Asking all these open-ended questions gets a child really in tune with their feelings to where they feel safe and comfortable to talk about their feelings. Informally, in everyday situations, do a feeling check. Just randomly, maybe when they wake up or when they're playing or after nap time. Ask them, how do you feel? What made you feel this way? And if it's a negative feeling like sad or scared or angry, ask them what would make them feel better and go through and have a two-way conversation with them. This stuff is so important, you guys. We all know adults who struggle with identifying and regulating feelings. So it's so important that we build this social emotional foundation in these young years. And I'll tell you one thing, all of these domains from birth to age 5, they transfer to Virginia Standards of Learning that they live and get tested on, or they learn and get tested on in public schools of Virginia. However, social and emotional are not SOLs that transfer. So not to say that your teachers are not teaching children social emotional skills, but this is so, so important in the young years. So I really encourage you to utilize these resources and don't forget about social emotional learning. Okay, so that was all I have in a really quick point of view. I'm going to leave my contact information up and then open this for any questions you might have. And then once you get your resources, if you have any questions or want any additional resources, or if there's anything I can do to help you, please feel free to contact me. You can email me, you can call me, you can text me. I have a website that's based for early childhood students. If you're interested in taking a couple early childhood classes, there are free scholarships that pay for tuition. They're not income based, so you're more than welcome to do that. The information on these scholarships is also found on my website, and I can also be found on Facebook at Miss Hopkins at TCC. So at this point, I want to open up for questions and any kind of discussion you guys might have.
Thank you for sharing, Jeannie. We do have one question, but before I get to that question, you had mentioned the Rainbow Fish book. We actually have that book here at our house. It's one of our favorite bath time books, and our little kids that we have in this house love it because it changes color. So,
and it's shiny, and who doesn't like shiny?
I mean, really.
Shiny objects are wonderful.
Now you have that Moana in my head, but it's totally fine. So one of the questions that came out was, so my child's school team swears by flashcards for rote learning, and why should we not use flashcards for children under 8?
So that is a great question. And let me reframe what I said a little better. It's not going to be detrimental to a child to use flashcards and worksheets from time to time, but it shouldn't be our primary focus when we're teaching children. And that goes back to learning development theory and child development. If you Google Jean Piaget, which is Jean Piaget, it talks about the stages of cognitive development, which means the way a child's brain goes through stages. And as I mentioned, children birth through age 2 are in what's called sensory motor period, where they learn through their senses and through movement. And a child's birth at, I'm sorry, not birth, 2 to age 7 is in what's called the pre-operational. So sure, flashcards, that could definitely help in a lot of different ways, but it's not the most appropriate for the stage their brain's in. Their brain needs concrete material. So if you want to teach about the letter A, great, give them a magnet of a letter A where they can actually feel one straight line, 2 straight lines, and then a short line. Give them, you know, a magnet letter S so they can feel the curves. Print out pieces of computer paper or write out all the letters really big and give them Play-Doh so they can roll snakes and create their own letter A. If you want them to learn how to associate words that start with the letter A, instead of giving them a flashcard with the A and an apple, give them a real apple to hold, to see, to taste, to smell. That is how children learn in that age. They learn through concrete, meaningful materials. Go find one of their find one of their stuffed alligators or stuffed animal. Find things that start with the letter A that are real concrete things that they can hold and feel and taste and smell. That is how children learn. That is not just me standing on a high horse saying flashcards and worksheets are bad. They're not bad. And in fact, the reason why most public schools utilize these is because public school teachers are at a really, high ratio. They've got what, 20, 25, 30 kids? They have to use what they can work with. And so rote learning is important. Rote learning is where you just memorize things. You're not actually understanding them necessarily. When you understand the concept, that's called rational memory. So rote memory is necessary in order to get to rational memory. But it's just like if you ask a toddler to sing their ABCs, they can sing their ABCs all day, but then you point to a letter and say, what's that? And they're like, 4. They don't necessarily know and understand that a letter is a symbol that stands for something, much less be able to identify it necessarily until they're older, but they've memorized a song, just like we did as kids. We memorized songs to learn the days of the week, the months of the year, the presidents, the states. So rote memory is an important foundation, but it's not the same as rational memory. So again, I'm not saying worksheets and flashcards are bad. Use them, that's fine, but they're not the most developmentally appropriate and effective way to reach children ages 2 through 7. And again, that is why testing, even benchmark testing like PALS, is not standardized until grade 3 when children are at that age where they can actually think that way. Even PALS testing is hands-on. It's a teacher doing things with children one-on-one. Okay, so it's just important to remember it's not bad, but it's not the most effective or developmentally appropriate way to teach children based on the way they learn. And again, if you want more information on that, I'm happy to send it, or you can Google Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive learning.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeannie. We do
Mhm.
have a few more questions.
Wonderful.
Sorry, I'm scanning through them. Can you share how your background helps you when you work with children with disabilities?
Oh gosh. Well, I definitely learned a lot in school. I had to take a lot of classes on exceptional children, and we call it exceptional children because they're children with disabilities and giftedness, and there's just such a range of different abilities. So of course I learned a lot in school, but I'll tell you the most that I learned was hands-on when I had a child in my class with autism, when I had a child that came to my class with different abilities such as English as a second language, or when I had a child that would come to me with speech impairments. I had to learn hands-on, okay, we're gonna start using sign language in this class. So for instance, when I had my first 2-year-old who had a speech impairment, couldn't speak, could only make noises, of course we practiced speech. They had a speech therapist, but we also learned American Sign Language so we could fully communicate, more milk, please, thank you, mom, dad, mom, dad. We learned to communicate not only just transitional words that could get us around the school day, but I also started teaching them the concepts that we would talk about each week. So every week we'd learn a new thing in preschool, and I would teach them sentences that had to do with that. So here's an example. And American Sign Language, in my opinion, is good for any child, typical or atypical, because it increases hand-eye coordination, which helps with reading, following reading left to right. It also increases their self-esteem because they can do something really cool. It increases their fine motor skills, their dexterity, which helps them later in writing and building these muscles. And it builds more language. So an example is maybe I'm teaching 4-year-olds about gardening right now. I would always teach my children about gardening and planting fruits and vegetables. I would teach them that flowers and vegetables grow in the garden and they need sun and rain to grow. Simple sentence, but my children would be so psyched to go home and teach their parents sign language. And I used to, there's some great ASL dictionaries online. One of my favorite is Signing Time by Rachel Coleman. She's got a wonderful dictionary that teaches you how to do all kinds of signs, and there's little video clips, and it's just wonderful. So I would say, long story short, it wasn't really short, but the way I learned mostly how to work with children with special needs was actually jumping in and doing it, working with speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, ABA therapists, all kinds of therapists, and just gleaning from them, learning as much as I could, and then passing it on to families. So really it was just experience.
Someone said they just wanted to say, hi, Miss Hopkins, and I love all of your ideas.
Oh,
So,
thank you. Glad
comment.
you guys are here.
And we do have 2 more questions, but in the essence of time, I'm going to ask one that I think will be fairly easy to answer.
Okay.
How young would you recommend introducing letter and number instruction?
I definitely think introducing it informally should start at birth. That's really important. Always, I'm sorry, that's Alexa reminded me to do my PT. Um, So informally giving them exposure, having alphabet number around their room at an eye level, by the way. You don't ever want to put things you want them exposed to high or at adult level because it's pointless when they don't see it. So put it at their level. And if you're worried about them ripping it down, go to, Home Depot or something, buy some plexiglass and put some screws through that junk and slip things inside of it so they don't tear it out. That's also good for displaying artwork, by the way. Plexiglass screws, get a couple of those anchors, and you're good. I've done that on my own, and I'm terrible with using anchors. But having them exposed to that, reading alphabet books, talking about the alphabet when you're driving, again, mapping out what you see and do is really important, especially with your infants and toddlers. Say, oh, look at that sign. That sign says McDonald's. It starts with the letter M. That's the kind of informal stuff you want to do with the young children. Then once they get into preschool, you can start asking them to identify, that's a letter M. You knew that. How did you know that was a letter M? And you're looking for them to justify, to think like, okay, I knew that was a letter M because it was a zigzag. It went up, down, up, down. Okay. So now they're starting to rationally understand what an M is. How did you know that was an S? Well, it has curves like a snake. So in preschool, you want to start getting them more involved with it. You might have them go on a scavenger hunt. You might write out all the letters of the alphabet, give them a couple magazines and newspapers, and let them cut out the letters. It's really important not to expect more of them than is developmentally appropriate, and that's why I'm giving you guys the learning standards, because it's really not till kindergarten when children are expected to identify the alphabet. Now, is that to say that children can't identify it younger? Absolutely not. I know 2-year-olds that can identify. I know 1-year-olds that can identify letters. That's great. That all goes back to their zone of proximal development. Every child is unique, even in the same family. Each child is totally different. So the problem with pushing it on them before they're ready, before they actually understand, is it can really damage their self-esteem. It's like your boss telling you, hey, no, you're not doing it right, or you just don't get this, do you? Then that goes into the theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we have these human needs starting with our basic needs, our self-esteem needs, so forth. If our self-esteem needs are not met, if we're feeling like we're not good enough, and again, that also goes back to Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial, you can look up, if we're not feeling confident and with a high self-esteem, we're not going to be in a place where we're ready to learn. So the last thing we want to do is knock their self-confidence down by pushing something they're not ready for and then saying, no, you have it wrong.
Thank you, Jeannie. I think what we're going to do, so there was a couple of other questions related to resources and things along those lines, so I'll touch base with you offline,
Okay.
get some additional information. So when I follow up with an email, I'll make sure to include the presentation PDF, the answers to the questions that we didn't get to, as well as the additional resources that we talked about.
Okay, and anybody that did have additional questions, you can feel free to email me, and I'm happy to email you directly back as well.
Absolutely, and this session was recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel within a couple of days, and we'll make sure that everyone knows about that. We put that information out on social media. Just a couple of things that I want to let everyone know is that next Therapist Thursday, we're going to explore, learn, and discover with Dana Blair Carroll. She's an occupational therapist.
Amazing.
And
you guys are going to love her.
She'll take us on an adventure around the house to find new playtime activities that we can do with our little ones at home. So building those skills through playtime. And again, we'll have questions and answers afterwards. So again, Jeannie, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to everyone that's in attendance. We wish you all a happy, healthy week.
Thanks. Bye, guys.